Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass.
And what's it gonna do?
It doesn't matter how you're doing. Woo! Wheeling, dealing, limousine right, jet flag.
Can you dig it, sucker?
Would you please shut the hell up?
You don't know what hard times are, Daddy.
The cream will rise to the top. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Look at the human rumble.
What up, what up? Welcome to another exciting episode of Keep the Kayfabe. I am not Mike Bate, as you can clearly tell, but this is your old friends, the Taking It Old School crew, Gary, Williams, and myself. We are going to do just that this week. It's very exciting. Gary, how are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm sorry to say that Val Venus has left the building as well. So, unfortunately, our fans are not going to get to hear from Val tonight. He's on location doing another professional physical movie.
Yes, if you understand what that means. He was probably in Milwaukee, too, for a certain convention. But,
must you go there? Must you
I
go
must.
there?
Will
Yes.
you, in the words of Gorilla, will you stop?
Will you stop? I believe that's Tito.
Yes. Wow. Spoiler alert, Tito's name will be coming up in this episode.
It will be.
But yeah, we thought we'd, as we do from time to time, we're going to do a little bit of old school. And what precipitated this was recently on AEW, there was an hour-long match between MJF and Will Ospreay, which by all accounts was outstanding. It was This isn't our place in this episode to go into depth about it, but it was legit. It was just, I mean, two guys, great story, the right balance, a fast, slow pace, but it was really good. But of course, invariably, because, and this is not a knock on anybody, but I think certainly generational people might have different opinions on things, but people proclaiming it the greatest of all time. Gary and I certainly have seen some hour-long matches in our day involving the likes of the Ric Flairs and the Stings and the Ricky Steamboats and you name it. But that got us thinking about this whole greatest of all time, or GOAT, if you will. And Gary put together a really interesting format here for us to kind of look at GOATs throughout the sort of pre-WrestleMania era, right? And why don't you explain it real quick?
Yeah. So what I did was I did a little research, and I think your point is well taken. I want to make sure that people know, this episode is not about, at least tonight's episode is not about identifying who we think is going to be the greatest of all time, because I think it's almost impossible not to get emotional about it to some degree. But what I did think was necessary was just thinking about, yeah, you're right. That hour-long match that we saw with MJF and with Will Ospreay was really cool. But that used to happen every night, literally every single night that Ric Flair, Harley Race, Bruno Sammartino at times, not so much, but those kinds of guys, they wrestled 60-minute matches every night across the country constantly. And then there's this other argument that's kind of been going around now that John Cena has announced his retirement. Will he surpass Ric Flair's 16-time world championship? And if he does, is he the greatest of all time? Blah, blah, blah. And again, I really believe in a lot of ways, some of these conversations, while they're very fun, they are kind of apples and oranges to some degree, because I do think there's something to be said about the pre-WrestleMania times and then the post-WrestleMania times. Now, some of the wrestlers on our GOAT match card for tonight have had post-WrestleMania, and so on a different episode of this, they may creep back up again. But what I thought we'd do tonight is take a look at just some pre or as WrestleMania kind of icons of wrestling. And I've created a match card in which Steve and I are going to just kind of banter a little bit about who has the greater claim to GOAT status of the three that we've put together, and just trying to figure out, who might be the GOAT of the match and select maybe a winner from the match. And we'll see how many we agree with and how many we disagree with. And I hope that those of you listening will get a kick out of it, and maybe you'll comment back and tell us that we're crazy and that we did, we should have picked some other ones. But yeah, I have a great match card lined up, and so let's hit the bell. Ding ding.
Yeah, so, you know what? Maybe some of you have heard of some of these guys, but maybe like one of the ones we mentioned, you haven't heard of the other guy, and that'll get you, after we're talking about it, like watch it on YouTube, like learn a little bit about somebody maybe that you knew in name only. But yeah, their bell has been rung.
Yes.
And we're ready to get going here.
Okay, so and the match card is being adjusted even as I'm speaking, just so you know. So, all right, first match. This is a GOAT triple threat. This is between Milwaukee's very own The Crusher, Gorgeous George, and George the Animal Steel. What are your initial reactions to that one, Steve?
Yeah, so I mean, I can go. We are going to talk about these, but of course, if I go with my kind of gut reaction, it's like, I'm from Milwaukee. Gary is too, but I still live here. One would think, oh, he's going to go Crusher all the way, but I feel like two of these three, and well, actually, all three were really a gimmick, a really larger than life gimmick. I feel like Gorgeous George, who I admittedly have the least experience with out of the three, feels to me like the bigger deal. Like I feel like the Crusher was more of a regional. He did get on WWF and AWA throughout the country, but I feel like he was more of a niche kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
George the Animal, I mean, maybe in his like younger days he did things that I'm just not even thinking of, but I think by the time I really focused on him, it was more of a silly act.
Yeah.
And I feel like Gorgeous George is just one of those names you'll never like. He's just kind of stamped in there. He feels like, to me, the bigger deal out of the three.
And I think we're gonna be in agreement on this one. Gorgeous George, he transcended the original heel. Like he was really one of the very first heels that came across as arrogant. So like Superstar Billy Graham, Ric Flair after him. I mean, that those guys mimicked. Even Muhammad Ali pointed to Gorgeous George at one time. But I don't want to dismiss though that the Crusher was iconic. I mean, he's got a statue in our hometown of South Milwaukee. And the other thing is George the Animal Steel is also very iconic. He was a teacher in the public schools, I believe, in Detroit area. He has a field named after him. He was a long-time educator. In fact, George the Animal was a novelty act because he basically would teach during the year and then he would go and tour on summer. And yes, when we saw him, he was more of a comedy act. But the thing about George was prior to that in the 70s, especially, he was just a dastardly heel. He was really, and he also is one of the originators of the foreign object. Like he would bring one of those tongue depressors taped up, and so I think this was a great battle. It was a good battle. But I do think I agree with you that of the three, I think Gorgeous George has the greater GOAT status claim of them. So, all right, first match happened. That's good. That's good. All right, this one gets a little bit more complicated now. You aren't kidding. Yeah, this one's Harley Race and Bruno Sammartino.
The deal with this one is, honest to God, like there's no. People are going to have strong opinions, but you can't say definitively, oh, this is a no-brainer. I mean, it really is your exposure. Like Bruno Sammartino in the WWF era, I mean, ridiculously long title reign, like larger than life. I mean, and then he was he went into his 50s, maybe 60s wrestling still.
Yeah.
Then an announcer. His reputation speaks for itself in the WWF.
Longest reigning champion for still to this day.
Yeah. But Harley Race, man, I mean, that guy, he was just, innovative, because I remember he went off the top or off the second or top, but like at the time they acted like that was going to ruin the business because he was too much of a quote unquote high flyer.
Yeah.
But man, he could go. And like, obviously he he gave us Ric Flair because he put him over. And he also went late into his career, a little bit more cornier when he was later, with the King gimmick and all that, but still a testament to how great and how like just timeless he was. And I mean, train guys, I don't know. I'm rambling now, but if you're gonna make me pick somebody, which we have to do on this show, I'm gonna go Harley Race.
Nice. You're right, Steve, when you said this is not the naked eye is not obvious, because for me, I think what tips over the edge for me with Bruno Sammartino is the fact that to this day, his record still stands. And that is not something that Harley Race can do. So I am going to go with Bruno. And again, but I also appreciate what Harley Race did. I mean, so Harley Race, as I think we might have covered this in one of our 80s episodes that we did, but he was doing hour-long Broadways and matches across the country. He was a traveling champion versus Bruno Sammartino, who is only regional. I mean, he was the champion in New York, which was at its time, very nationalistic. I mean, it had Pedro Morales, who was Puerto Rican. It had people like Bruno Sammartino, who was appealing to the Italians. But for me, like, the fact that Bruno's record still is intact today gives Bruno the edge. So for me, he's got better GOAT stats. Fair.
Nobody can argue that.
Yeah, that's right. All right, let's. The card turns old school right now as we see a GOAT triple threat between Verne Gagne, Fritz von Erich, and Stu Hart.
The patriarchs.
So for our fans who maybe aren't 100%, let's just do a background. Verne Gagne was champion and promoter of the AWA. Fritz von Erich, those of you may have seen the recent movie called The Iron Claw, that he was in World Class Championship Wrestling down in Texas. And Stu Hart was Calgary Stampede Wrestling up in Canada, and the father of the Hart family of Bret Hart, Ilk, and many others. What say you, my friend?
Boy, this is really tough. I mean, like Verne, I get the nostalgia too, because AWA is kind of what I grew up on.
Yeah.
On Sunday mornings. Fritz, I learned about a little later in my wrestling fandom because I didn't watch that as a kid, but my God, I mean, how can you not know about it now? They make movies about that family. And then Stu Hart, I mean, the Hart Dojo and his own family and other people he trained.
But the same could be said about Verne Gagne.
Yes,
because there'd
be no Hulk Hogan if there would be no Verne Gagne.
No
Bobby Heenan,
no Ric Flair, no Iron Sheik. He trained Ricky Steamboat, Ken Patera. I mean, the list goes on and on with Verne Gagne as well. So,
here's what I'm gonna pick. I'm gonna pick Stu Hart just because I can just keep coming up. I mean, Bret Hart, one of the all-time greats.
Yeah.
Owen Hart. I mean, we just had the Owen Hart tournament. I mean,
Jim Neidhart.
Chris Jericho. I mean, Roddy Piper. All went through the dojo. I mean, you could just, and there's like, we could spend like half a show. We could spend a whole show talking about every wrestler that went through that dojo. And I just think, certainly if you look at even at an international standpoint, just with Canada and the relationship with the United States in wrestling, I don't know. There's no wrong answer in here, but I'm gonna go Stu Hart.
Interesting. So for me, what's interesting, Steve, you make a very compelling case. Here's the thing for me, though. I think at the end of the day, Fritz von Erich was very regional. And while if anyone does any research on World Class Championship Wrestling, I mean, they were printing money in the 80s and they did things that nobody else was doing. But the thing but it was very regional, and I don't necessarily feel like at the end of the day, like I think there's a lot more, dark clouds around there than anything else. So now if it's between Verne Gagne and Stu Hart, here's the thing. For me, I agree, but both guys have a legacy of training people. You cannot deny that.
Right.
What I think tips one over the edge, believe it or not, is just it's his ability to transition his league into the modern era, get on ESPN, become national, for whatever it's worth. And I'm going to go with Verne Gagne. And I think that what tips over the edge between Verne Gagne and Stu Hart is the fact that Verne was able to continue to modernize his league to the point. Now, granted, both of them lost the territorial battles to Vince McMahon.
So did everybody.
But everybody did. I just think if on a more global level, I think Verne Gagne's ability to get on ESPN, for his ability, and I also think to some degree his being an Olympic gold medalist, also you got to kind of take that into factor in terms of, as you look at the three different guys and their wrestling abilities. And Verne Gagne, even till the very, very end, was still competing for his own championships, and whereas Stu Hart was pretty much behind the scenes. So, my greatest GOAT claim of those three would be Verne Gagne.
We are split on two of the three, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take this next one because I think it's time for the women's match. I think it's definitely time to bring the women out. This one is Sherri Martel, Scary Sherri, but at the time, just Sherri Martel, and then the fabulous Moolah.
Whew. So it is very, very, very hard for me to assess this without the whole story because
agreed.
When I grew up, there was nobody but Fabulous Moolah kind of representing women wrestling. And from what I was, my exposure, this champion forever, but yet cynically, it was like a good chunk of that. There was nobody really credible to take it from her.
No.
And then, it's impossible to untether. And here, let me qualify this. She has a really tarnished legacy. But I also think that also influences this because if you believe all you hear about her, she kind of did hold back others to keep her spot.
She did, but you gotta give it to her. I mean, she controlled all of women's wrestling for how long?
I might be like providing a different answer from you again, but I just can't not pick Sherri Martel for a number of reasons. One, she was a kind of in that transition era where women wrestlers were kind of becoming a little bit more starlet types.
Yeah.
She starlet, not Scarlet. She was badass and legit. And everybody that talks about her talks about how just badass she was, like in and out of the ring, behind and in front of the camera. And she not only was a good wrestler, AWA, I believe, and WWF, but she transitioned into a long, effective career. I mean, she was the one that kicked off the Shawn Michaels heel turn that went on to perhaps one of the greatest wrestlers of our time. And she was a fundamental part of that. Harlem Heat, like she's a great manager too. And I don't know. I just feel like she was a trendsetter in her own right, at least to me in a slightly more interesting way, because Moolah probably did stuff when she was younger that I'm just marginalizing.
True.
But the Moolah I really remember, it was on top because there was nobody else. And part of that was her own stomping on others.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm probably very biased on this one, but Sherri Martel to me is just kind of a cool story.
Yeah. I don't think it's wrong to be, well, obviously, as we've talked about, whenever you're thinking about GOAT, right?
Yeah.
It's in the eye of the beholder. I mean, if, clearly we're doing this show, and the reason partly that we're doing the old school is because I think, for Mike and Matt, there a lot of these characters, they don't even know, or they weren't even born yet for some of them, but but in the same token, when you think about the whole package, so you think about their career, their gimmick, their in-ring ability, their promo skills, their ability to either draw a crowd or draw heat from a crowd, I think it's almost impossible for Sherri Martel not to be the greater GOAT in this situation, because I think Moolah was a crap talker kind of in her later years, but I mean, like, I think Sherri Martel was a multi world's champion. She was in the AWA, and I believe she got the WWF title as well.
Yes, I believe so.
And so Moolah, yes, she was on top the whole time, but for me, like, I think Sherri Martel really left a mark in terms of developing an actual character, something beyond just a wrestler. But the thing about her, and the thing that I think also trumps her over Moolah, she took a lot of bumps, both as a wrestler. If you watch some of her old matches, she wasn't afraid to fly around. Moolah was more of the plodding and stomping kind of thing. So I just, I'm with you. I give Sherri Martel, we both probably could be definitely outvoted by the nation here, by saying, by our listeners, because of Moolah's run. But in the same token, I really believe Sherri Martel has greater GOAT status.
For sure.
All right. Okay. So this one is, I think, this one's a little fascinating because it's, but the match card is subject to change, and it just got changed.
Oh, dear.
Just so you know. So you're going to have to pivot on this one. So we're going to go, this is a GOAT death match, death match. And it's between Terry Funk, Roddy Piper, and Mick Foley.
Holy Lord.
This is a triple threat to the death match.
Oh my gosh. Terry Funk, Mick Foley,
and Roddy Piper.
Well, in some ways, I'm not going to, the listeners don't get to know what your original match card had, maybe.
Correct.
But I'm going to say, in some ways, this makes it almost a little easier for me. But yet,
than the other one? Oh,
yes, because honestly, again, you could make argument, like I could argue with myself for an hour on this one, because Terry Funk, my God, I mean, all-timer, just passed away, wrestled into his 70s, and yet was relevant every era he was in. Some of the craziest stuff. I mean, he went hardcore when hardcore was on the rise. He and his brother dominated the scene. Double Cross Ranch, like his I Quit match with Ric Flair, one of my all-time favorites. His feud with Jerry Lawler, so on. Mick Foley, most of you that are a little bit younger, he doesn't need an introduction. I mean, he went from like kind of garbagey wrestler to like an all-timer, most beloved WWE World Champion, so on. But I have to go Roddy Piper, because he just is just that he has, at least in the mainstream, slightly more icon status to me, because one, he was just that centerpiece villain of the 80s. Hogan needed that, or I don't think Hogan would have been this successful in the onset. And then he went on to be a beloved, I think, because he's just so damn good at what he did. He went on to be a great baby face too, but he always had that quirky edge. Probably, I mean, out of the three of that, oh man, I'm gonna argue. I was gonna say probably the best promo out of the three, but Terry Funk was pretty damn good too.
It's pretty damn good. Damn good.
Piper, and then he went on to Hollywood. I mean, he had a couple legit movies. Like, I mean,
so did Terry Funk.
So did Terry Funk, but I mean, yeah. Oh God, but I don't know. I'm gonna stick with it. I think Roddy Piper stuck just a little bit. It gets the edge on just being the guy that more people. He's more of a household name in the world than the other two.
Okay, that's fair. Whew. So yeah, this one's not an easy one.
No.
And so I'll go by process of elimination. I think Mick Foley gets pinned first, because honestly, I agree. His younger, he's known for, the Hell in the Cell and some other things. And yes, he'll always be a great, character in wrestling. But of the two of them, I don't know. And so now you've
I
got
agree.
Piper and Funk that are battling it out. And here's the only thing that I could think was different between the two of them. Now, granted, Roddy Piper passed away, a little earlier in his life than Terry Funk necessarily did. But the last parts of Roddy Piper's career were not flattering.
That's true. Yeah, he hung on too long. He had that run where him and Flair got the tag team titles when they were old in WWE,
And
it
he
was
was
just
not
pure
not good.
nostalgia. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm not saying that Terry Funk was, a body Adonis, but I will say that dude could go, and
Oh,
he
yes.
kept going, and his ticker, and you think about, he was an NWA world champion at one point. The thing that Roddy Piper has going for him is, I think to this day, there will be very few true heels that will. MJF has got an opportunity, Ric Flair,
Yes.
obviously, but Roddy Piper's ability during that rock and roll era and that first iteration with Hogan, and right at WrestleMania 1, like literally right at the edge of the WrestleMania era, of which we're trying to talk a little bit more pre.
Yeah.
But I think he will go down as one of the greatest heels. But then again, I don't think Terry Funk is not only, he's a little bit more regional and maybe not as well known, but that guy could go. Like, if you look at some of his matches, even some of his matches on like Saturday Night's Main Event, where it got more mainstreamed with him and Dory and JYD and Hogan. I mean, like, but the fact that he kept going and created some different characters, like Chainsaw Charlie, did all kinds of other things. To me, Terry Funk gets the pin over Roddy Piper.
I think that's reasonable. You're an egg-sucking dog.
You're an egg-sucking dog. All right. Well, I took someone out of the original match card, but I think this got a little bit more difficult. But I am also card subject to change, and so we're going with a Jerry the King Lawler and Nick Bockwinkel.
Wow. You sure know how to pick them.
So for those of our fans, right?
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Tell them a little bit about Nick Bockwinkel.
So Nick Bockwinkel was just, I mean, again, not the first arrogant heel, but like, to me, one of the, at least in my lifetime, one of the guys that really stands out, because it wasn't just stupid talking. He was very intellectual, and he had Bobby Heenan with him, and he was just a great heel, and just like look down on the fans, look down on his opponent. And really, in a company that was so dependent on Verne Gagne at the top, he kind of got the keys to the kingdom after that, which is a tremendous testament to at least Verne's confidence in him. And he's a great heel. Funny enough, after he wrestled, he did some stints like in NWA, WCW as the commissioner. Not nearly as interesting as he was as a wrestler, but not a knock on him either. But Jerry Lawler, I mean, my God, I mean, it's almost impossible not to pick him on this one, because just his imprint on wrestling, that region, and how long the longevity it had, and some of these innovative storytelling techniques that kind of bridged the gap into modern wrestling storytelling. Really, he was doing stuff like that before it was kind of cool, and just a great wrestler. Again, went late into his career, and like Terry Funk, never really embarrassed himself, I think, because he knew his limitations, but he wrestled into his 60s. Hell, he wrestled, I think, after he had his heart attack that almost died. Never looked bad. And then, love him or hate him in the style he did it, one of the all-time announcers as well. That's a full body of career right there. And I just think he to me, out of all the ones we've done so far, to me, that's a little more clear cut that Jerry Lawler's the bigger deal.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, at the end of the day, the things that you said about Nick Bockwinkel cannot be discredited, though. I mean, his heel work and the kind of like, for our listeners that are used to, more used to like the genius Lanny Poffo and the way he would kind of project himself,
Yeah.
or Steven Regal would project himself as this, this better than, or even Triple H when Triple H first started.
Yes,
that
the Connecticut blue blood.
Yeah, that was Nick Bockwinkel. He's like, I'm from Los Angeles, and I'm smarter than all of you, and I'm wiser than all of you. And just he and Bobby Heenan together were just,
oh my gosh,
magic. Like, they were just amazing. Their ability to just get under your skin and sneak out that victory, when the babyface clearly should have won, and but Jerry Lawler over Nick Bockwinkel, mainly because he literally carried a whole territory with sellout after sellout after sellout, all in the 80s. I mean, the guy printed money down there, but I mean, like, in the same token, like, I think, his character, his ability behind the scenes, his storytelling, his ability to influence a whole generation of people. And, I agree. The greater GOAT of these two is definitely Jerry Lawler.
Yes, agreement.
Okay. All right, here we go. We're starting to get this one's really tough, I think. Ricky Steamboat and the Great Muda.
See, what's tough about this is that
up to this point, I've tried to keep all the heels together, or all the whatever.
Yes.
This one I purposely kind of split up.
Yeah,
but yeah.
It's really compelling to me because here, Ricky Steamboat, I mean, anybody stateside that remembers, I mean, he had one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time with Macho Man Randy Savage. He had some of the greatest wrestling matches of all time with Ric Flair. Ric Flair, who is to many the GOAT of wrestling, cites him as by far his best opponent, and they wrestled so many times. That, I mean, and he was always a good guy, and never, I mean, and then he made little stints when he was 60s and older, and still looked great.
Even recently.
But where Muda is compelling is because I don't even think I mean, as much as researched as we are, probably realize the impact he had.
No.
A, in Japan.
Correct.
But B, like, honest to God, I didn't watch Japanese wrestling when I was younger, but when he came over to WCW,
and
he was just mesmerizing. And his matches with Sting. And I remember him wrestling Flair, and one of them, to me, the most iconic visuals was Flair had part of his face red from blood, the other part green from the mist.
Yes.
And he was in that Future Shock where they all wrestled each other. Like, and then he came back periodically and still had that mesmerizing aura about him. And then I think the other thing that probably gives him like lots of points is, like, one, he went late into his career very effectively. I think he retired like a year or two ago. He also, I think, either for sure ran a wrestling organization, but I think might have even founded it, Wrestler One or Wrestling One in Japan. So, I mean, that gives back to so it's like, my God, this one's really hard. I think I'd have to go Ricky Steamboat just from the machine, like the wrestling all-time match machine that he was. And the fact that Flair, one of the all-time greatest, cited him as his best opponent. But man, really compelling conversation.
Yeah, this would definitely be an argument. I think the argument is really the Orient and the East and the West, right?
Yes.
This is a classic East-West, the old Adrian Adonis and Jesse Ventura East-West connection. But this truly is, and I think, as I look at the two of them, the thing that is hard, I think, so for me, I don't know for fact, but the Great Muda wasn't original of a shtick and a gimmick, because there was the Great Kabuki before him who did the Green Mist and did all of that stuff.
True.
And so for me, like, I'm not, but Ricky Steamboat was an original character and never wavered. I mean, his whole career, he was the same, to put on a career like he had and not change his gimmick at all is pretty remarkable. Not only
totally.
never going heel, but always just being a white meat babyface, and his ability to be tag champion, his ability to be an NWA champion and intercontinental champion. I mean, I just, I think at the end of the day, if you want, you look at career, gimmick, promo, crowds, the great Muda really didn't speak, and so was hard to get. But that was in itself was kind of a mystique.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
When I think about the in-ring stuff, I think it's hard to knock where that Ricky Steamboat's got a bit of an edge. Now, while the great Muda did that springboard,
never
somersault thing. Holy cool! When he pulled that out for the first time, I was like, holy cow, unbelievable. But I think from a wrestling standpoint, I think that's really where Ricky Steamboat gets the edge for me as well.
I think so. Good one, though.
And that was a really good one. Well, my friend, I think the managers are going to come out now.
Okay.
And
I'm ready for this.
Yeah, we're definitely, we've had a change to the card. Change to the card is a triple threat manager match. Bobby the Brain Heenan, Jimmy Hart, and Jim Cornette.
Oh my gosh, you really did mix this up.
I did.
You know what? To me, this is a great conversation, but out of everything, certainly up to this point, and maybe everything left that you got, to me, this is a no contest. Bobby the Brain Heenan has to win this. And if you would have thrown Paul Heyman in there, I still would have.
So the original
four-way.
Yeah, the original match card had Paul Heyman in there. We've even got down the card. We even have a Mr. Fuji and Freddie Blassie could have gotten thrown. We could have had a manager battle royal.
And I think to me, no answer changes.
No.
Bobby the Brain Heenan was so good in every single way you can be in wrestling. He was a great wrestler. People don't realize that didn't see that part of it. One of the absolute greatest managers of all time, if not the greatest, and one of the absolute greatest of all time announcers. I mean, all three things he did equally well. And I've heard the argument said that if he hadn't done any, like Bobby Heenan would go down as an all-time great if he had stuck to wrestling. He would be an all-time great if he stuck to management. And I think that's the testament. It's like he could have, just a naturally gifted, hilarious dude, like great manager, like in some case wrestlers that needed that aura that he brought. Some of these guys, like I loved Hercules, but Hercules on his own, not as interesting. And so on and so on. I mean, the guy to help pull off Andre turning heel.
Yes.
And he made that. I mean, Andre needed the help too, from a personality standpoint at that point in his career. Yeah, Bobby the Brain, to me, all-time great. One of the all-time greats in wrestling, period.
Agreed. Like, and if Bobby Heenan got matched up against some of these other guys, I think it would be a contest. Like, because it's hard to dispute where he falls. And I think this is exactly why when people today are like, oh, this guy's the greatest of all time, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but if you ever watched Bobby Heenan, you would, there was not a time that man was on screen or in an interview or in a promo or you name it. There was not a time that I can think of where I was like, boy, that sucked.
Right. No, never. There was no.
That man was on all the time.
And I still remember, like to this day, some people didn't like when Hogan turned heel. They thought Bobby ruined it a tiny bit because he kept yelling, but whose side is he on? You weren't supposed to be thinking that. But to me, that was Heenan playing his character, because why would he ever trust Hogan? He hated him.
He hated him.
He built stables to fight Hogan. That was the perfect line for Bobby Heenan to say. And I stand by it. Yeah.
He I don't know where Hulk Hogan would be without Bobby Heenan. I mean, Bobby Heenan.
It's like the argument for Piper.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he's the perfect antagonist. He was the weasel. I mean, that guy if you watch old AWA stuff, and I'm telling you, there's some classic stuff with him and Nick Bockwinkel and just whatever, but they literally had a match where if Bobby Heenan lost, he would get put in a weasel suit.
Yep, lots
Oh
of
my
those.
God. Like you guys, the place, the roof was coming off the Civic Center in Minneapolis. Like, I mean, this dude just, I mean, it's hard to deny. I mean, I tried everything I could, Steve. I thought about, Skandar Akbar. No,
Yeah.
he was
No.
not going to do any good. Or Gary Hart. Now, or JJ Dillon. I think JJ Dillon maybe gave him a little bit run. Now, here's the only part of Bobby Heenan's career. If you look from what I remember, and I could be wrong, but other than Nick Bockwinkel, I don't think anyone won anything throughout.
No.
No.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem to matter.
But it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Like Jimmy Hart had a ton of tag team champions and all.
Was he still managing Andre the Giant when Andre
mean,
beat Hulk Hogan?
I mean,
and was champion for like minutes.
Yeah, technically, maybe that might have been his
so.
only claim to fame.
I think so.
Well, no, he was partnered with Ric Flair, so I got to give him that.
That's true. Yeah, when Flair won the title.
Yeah. Okay. So
that's very true.
I my words go back, but
but most of it was not.
No. I mean, now for those listening, if this was a manager battle royal, Classy Freddie Blassie and Mr. Fuji were also compelling characters and also were tremendous heels and tremendous wrestling heels as well. So they were born out of a completely different cloth than, say, Jimmy Hart and Jim Cornette. And the sad part about this is we've talked about all these guys, and Jim Cornette is probably also one of the greatest mouthpieces. There's very few times I can also say where I would watch an old clip of the NWA or Smoky Mountain or something, and I'm not like laughing at something Jim Cornette said. Although he's a little off the rocker today sometimes, I think.
Yes. I don't like today's version, but no, he was. And I mean, the dude was a heat magnet because, that's why he carried a loaded racket, because he had to protect himself from people. That's how hated he was.
Yeah. Oh, crazy. Well, that was a good manager battle royal. Last minute battle royal I got thrown in there, but all right, we move on, and now we are in a triple threat tag team match.
Oh Lord!
And this one I think is we have two triple threat tag team matches. The first one is the Road Warriors, Wild Samoans, and the Rock and Roll Express.
So I'll steal like a page from your book and at least say who I think gets eliminated first, if that's a thing. It's not a death match, but I'm gonna, for the sake of simplicity, take the Wild Samoans out of this. Impactful, great, but to me, the Rock and Roll Express and the Road Warriors, for different reasons, are to me like two of the all timers. And the Road Warriors were just, for a while there, they just had this aura of unstoppability that no other team had in that era, and maybe even now, like to this day. Like, and just international sensations, the entrance, everything. Those guys just, it felt like they could never lose. They did lose sometimes, but man, in just the presentation, coming out to like Iron Man, and then later not because they didn't have the rights to it. But they just larger than life figures. And the Rock and Roll Express, some of the greatest wrestling matches of all time they were part of, with the Midnights and all these other teams. And again, like to this day, it's still wrestling. And Ricky Morton, like many people say, he could have been like one of the all-time great solo baby faces. That's how good he could evoke. They just had the formula down. They just win the crowd. So it's like, to me, those, I don't know, they're both so iconic. I'm gonna pick the Rock and Roll Express because the Road Warriors were rude to my family at a restaurant. I get the last laugh.
You do. So what's fascinating? I think you're completely wrong.
Oh my goodness!
Like the fact that I think the Wild
dismissed
Samoans,
the Wild Samoans. Yeah,
I think the Wild Samoans are the greatest of all time, and here's why. Some of the greatest of all time are because of the Wild Samoans. And it's hard to deny. It is very hard to deny that even at its time, they weren't one of the greatest tag teams of all time. They were, multi-time WWF champions. They were amazing. They were like one of the first kind of like character tag teams. But Offensica, I mean, Steve.
Yeah.
How many goats were because of them? The Road Warriors, you're right, at its time, but they could wrestle for shit. They can.
That's true.
And I'm not telling you
Yeah.
Offensica were great shakes, but they, honestly, but they wrestled better than the Road Warriors. The Road Warriors couldn't wrestle. They were gimmicky as all get out.
That's true.
And then you look at the Rock and Roll Express, and while they and the Midnight Express could, if you threw them in there, I think if I had thrown the Midnight Express in there, that would have made it really hard for you, because
that would have been extremely hard.
Yeah, I know how much you like the Midnight Express, but here's the thing though. Regionally speaking, the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express were great regional tag teams, but they weren't national tag teams.
Oh,
Offensica from Hawaii, internationally, you name it. And at the end of the day, they, outside of the ring, have produced some of the greatest wrestlers of all time that truly will be GOATs. So for me, it's a landslide. Wow. The Wild Samoans take this match.
Well, last thing I'll say about the Road Warriors, out of these three teams, who hooked up with the most ladies?
Okay, well, it sure wasn't the Wild Samoans. I can say that much.
Yeah, definitely not.
All right. Well, I feel like it's been a bit of a disadvantage for you not to hear some arguments. So I'm going to go first on this one. So,
okay.
All right. We're into the home stretch here. This one is, stable versus stable versus stable. The Horsemen, Von Ericks, and the Freebirds.
Wow.
All right. So I think this one, for me, the Von Erichs speak for themselves, right? But I do think of the three, they're the one that gets eliminated first. Then it comes down to the Horsemen and the Freebirds. And this I
agree with that.
This was really hard, because I tell you, like, when it came to the Horsemen, right, at the peak of their time, there was no greater faction. Right. However, I also am extremely partial to, as you know, World Class Championship Wrestling. In fact, I believe I sent you a screenshot as I was watching an episode on Peacock from the 1980s. And when I think about heels of heels that could work, the Freebirds were phenomenal. The only thing that I think, in some ways, if you want to split hairs, that differ is the Horsemen never could figure out all the people they wanted in there, and it changed so often.
That's true.
The Freebirds never changed, really. Its core was always intact.
Yeah,
and they were the first ones to introduce music into the wrestling scene.
Exactly. Yes.
And so, like entrance music and music videos and promos like that. So, and then the last thing I'll say is, for all that, all of the different Horsemen, it is hard to dismiss the impact that Michael Hayes has had on the wrestling industry today. Now, granted, like the Horsemen at its time, Arn, Tully, Ric Flair, Ole Anderson, I mean, you name it, there's a lot of iterations. And there are some great GOATs in there. But if I just look by the faction, to me, the Freebirds take the cake. And I think that's controversial for a lot of people because of how beloved the Horsemen are.
I'm going to tell you, I agree 100%. I think the Freebird, and I think for a lot, basically the same reasons. One, the innovation of the Freebirds, and the Von Ericks were iconically loved. The family, they would have never been as good as they were without these despicable heels that just and like you said, they could go. These are all-time great matches because, I mean, like, they were great. All three of them. And then I would say four. Not everybody counts Jimmy Jam Garvin, but the Freebirds, the Freebirds do.
Yep.
Like Michael Hayes considers him a a Freebird, and he went in the Hall of Fame with him, and he was great. So I think, yeah, they're 4 for 4. Whereas the Horsemen, their nucleus was better than most, but it went on. It went on way too long, and even in the Nitro era, it was not. I mean, I'm sorry, Dean Malenko, great, but not. I mean, it's just they kind of turned into more of a workman's group because Dean Malenko and Benoit were good wrestlers, not a lot of personality. Then you started getting corny with the Mongo McMichaels, and then even before that, freaking Paul Roma and stuff. I mean, they really had a lot of swing and misses for the back half of it. But the Freebirds just were great, and like you said, there's Michael Hayes is still like a relevant figure in wrestling, and he never hasn't been. So yeah, I think the Freebirds are they've left their stamp even more so. And you're right, that is controversial because lots of people will pick the Horsemen.
Yeah. All right. Okay, here we go. The match card has changed.
Of course.
We had a last minute substitution. Here we go. We're gonna go Randy Savage and Sting.
Oh my Lord. You did this to me on purpose.
I did. Okay, so
please.
I'm okay.
I do have an answer, but I want to hear yours.
I think I know your answer. And I think, this one to me, okay, so again, now if you consider the whole body of work, it is very hard to dismiss what Sting has done over his whole career. However, with that being said, if you also counted mainstream popularity and or marketability, which are GOAT factors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's not going to know, oh, yeah, or
Slim Jim.
Step into Slim Jim, oh, yeah. Like, that may live on for a long time. And for me, as great as Sting was in the ring, I think Savage definitely could go. So as I think about the whole body of work, and then I think from a wrestling standpoint, I think Randy Savage was a better wrestler. I think so. I mean, one could argue. High Flyer really did some things that were innovative in his time. I think from a promo personality standpoint, it's hard to deny that Savage was stronger than Sting in that. I think Sting may have, more crowd appeal, but then again, Savage was a heat magnet and there was no denying what he could do. So, but for when I think about the difference between these two, as much as Sting, I think Sting will be forgotten before Randy Savage will be.
So these are two of my all-time favorites. Sting, in fact, might be, depending on the day you catch me, my all-time favorite wrestler. Just wrapped up his career this year and did it magnificently. Again, a guy that never embarrassed himself.
Mm-hmm.
Every era of Sting has been cool, and he's been effective, and he's learned to roll with the eras. Hard to top that. But if I'm being pragmatic, there is probably no single category that I could list that Macho Man isn't a little bit better in. Like, better wrestler, yes, I would say. Better promo, yes. More huge household name. I mean, it's almost like a 1-2 with him and Hogan. Some of the again, Steamboat. It took two to tango on that one. Steamboat, we just talked about being one of the all-time greatest. Steamboat didn't have all-time greatest matches with other guys other than Flair. Yeah, I mean, Macho Man's feuds, like with Hogan, with Ric Flair, with put DDP on the map. Like, he just, in the eras, he did that. So yeah, I think Macho Man has to get the nod. I would say that.
I'm shocked.
Fairly strongly, I would say Macho Man's
I'm shocked.
the one. I'd be answering with my heart too much, but even that's not that much because Macho Man's right up there with me.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Now, if I had thrown these next two guys in there, Mr. Perfect and Ted DiBiase,
oh yeah,
then you would have been really in trouble, right? Like that, because that's another three-way that I had written down, which was triple threat: Tito Santana, Mr. Perfect, and Ted DiBiase. And I mean, that one's a banger in of itself. And here's the reason, because, and it doesn't seem obvious, but all three of these guys, well before mainstream WWF, had amazing careers.
For sure.
Like, it was hard to deny Tito Santana, like in the early NWA days. Like, if you do any research on him, boy, he was off the charts. And then the original, Mr. Perfect, who was Kurt Hennig, back in the AWA days. I mean, his AWA heavyweight championship run was, he beat Nick Bockwinkel, and they had, and I vividly remember on New Year's Eve, I watched it in my house on ESPN. It was a bloody 60-minute draw between him and Nick Bockwinkel, off the chart match. It was phenomenal. And then, here's the thing, this is where Ted DiBiase, right? I mean, as much as we know about how great the $1 Million Man was, in Mid-South, he was even worse. Like, he was a dastardly heel, and really was. And then he was also one of the, before that in Mid-South, was a beloved figure. So, I mean, I call this match a draw.
Wow. A draw. That's a first ever.
A time limit goat draw.
Yeah, that's tough because you said so much there that I don't want to go on and on and on, but it's like, it's really, this one's hard for me too, because Mr. Perfect is like one of my all-time favorites too. So, and I just think his cool factor, and like, I mean, to me, like, but oh man, I wouldn't pick Tito, but
yeah. But here's the thing.
Out of the three,
if you think about career, in-ring performance, ability to incite a crowd, like Arriba, remember that? I mean, like,
I do.
I mean, that guy. Now, here's the thing. He would get a knock on gimmick and promo.
He wasn't outstanding promo by any means. He was just okay.
And so, like, Mr. Perfect, Ted DiBiase definitely match him in terms of in-ring, and I would say from career standpoint, they all had many, many championships. So, like, I took the easy way out with a draw, but I definitely think at the end of the day, though, if I were pushed, my vote would be with Ted DiBiase for this single reason, is because at the end of the day, of all the things, career long, his whole career, his gimmick, in-ring, promo, the last thing would be crowds. Ted DiBiase was a main eventer.
Yeah.
Far more from Mid-South. With him and JYD, we're packing the Superdome. Superdome. Yes, Kurt Hennig was doing stuff in Minneapolis, but he never really was a main eventer as much as Ted DiBiase was.
That's fair.
Well, we've come to the main event.
Oh boy.
It's a fatal four-way.
This involved Mojo Rawley.
Yeah, you got it. Dusty Rhodes.
Oh my God.
Andre the Giant. Ric Flair. And Hulk Hogan.
Oh my goodness.
Now, pre-WrestleMania era.
Pre-WrestleMania era?
I mean, we've got to kind of identify it
that
as
takes one out then.
Yes, to me it does, but
I
think the WrestleMania era is, I don't think we can go with this one past, like, even if we include up to WrestleMania 3, which then is fairly fair game because there were Starrcades and all kinds of other stuff.
Sure.
What do you think?
No, wait, hold on. I got so fixated. It was this Dusty, Flair, Hogan.
Dusty, Flair.
Oh, and
Hogan,
Andre. Yeah.
Okay, so
Ooh,
let's throw the case for any of them. All right. So first one, I'll throw this out. I'll go with I'll throw a case out for Dusty Rhodes. Okay. So unbelievable talker, unbelievable personality, unbelievable ability to draw. Was to this day is still seen as a father figure for many. In ring, meh.
Yeah.
Meh. Like, meh. But national figure, I mean, it's hard to deny, from Florida up to the Crockett's, then up to the WWF, and then to the NXT afterwards, but if we just go up to around let's try to just ignore to some degree for these four things past WrestleMania 3 up to WrestleMania 3, Dusty was a household name. He was drawing, but I don't think he was drawing to the extent that the other three were.
I think that's fair. I agree with that.
All right.
Yeah. He doesn't win this one for me in the pre-era.
In the pre-era,
yeah.
If you take out everything past WrestleMania 3, and the reason we include WrestleMania 3 only for this reason is because then it's a fairly fair game between Hogan and Andre, and you got to count Flair in there because Flair had some banger Starcades up to that point, banger Starcades. So you've got Hogan, right?
Yep.
Who was an unbelievably charismatic figure in WrestleMania 3. However, I would say up to WrestleMania, not as popular.
I agree. Yeah, his AWA run was foundational, but it wasn't on par with the other names we've talked about.
And his original WWF run was overshadowed by Andre.
Yes.
So people are going to think we're crazy, but now you've got it, in my mind, it's down to Andre and Flair.
With the era we're talking about.
With the era we're speaking about.
Changing their business and all that. I mean, Hogan's hard to argue with the whole body of work. Plus the NWO, all that.
Yes.
But I think in the era we're talking about, this feels right.
Right. And now I know we've talked out of both sides of our mouth because we have talked about others saying, their longevity across. But
sure,
for the sake of
that's true. I did a lot of that. That's true.
Yeah. But for the sake of just this match, if it becomes a harder question, because at the end of the day, if you truly have to look at WrestleMania 3 as the breaking point for these four guys, and I think up to WrestleMania 3, between Flair and Andre, it's hard to deny their abilities and what they did in the pre-WrestleMania days. I don't necessarily think after WrestleMania 3, I think it's a no-brainer. I think Hogan trumps them.
I agree.
And as great, and this is hard for me to say because I love the character Ric Flair. I do not, and I want to make sure this is clear, do not agree with his antics outside, but his character, top notch. But when it comes to a global phenomenon, I think up to WrestleMania 3, it would be hard to argue that Andre wouldn't have been the GOAT.
I think that's true. And I don't think people, even me, me at my age and what I watched growing up, fully appreciate the global impact, because a lot of us remember him from WrestleMania, which was iconic, but a shell of what he was.
A shell.
When he was just beating everybody and just winning these battle royals and going around the world and drawing every single place he went. Like he
huge. Was like Flair was a traveling champion, give him that. But without, and this is the crazy part, I think, without a title, without a championship, of which Andre never had. I mean, he would go from territory to territory to territory and would sell out places just by wrestling battle royals and all kinds of other, feature matches with their top heels and their top baby faces, and he did it across the globe, like across the globe.
Yes.
And
big deal everywhere.
And the other thing too is, then you just think about his earlier days. He was a much better wrestler. In fact, as I just alluded to, I watched an old World Class from 1982. And what's funny is if you actually go into Peacock and watch some of the territory stuff, he was in Mid-South in the month of January, and then in February was in Texas, and he's on like 4 shows, and then I think he went somewhere else after that. But he was crazy better of a wrestler. Like you just if you don't think about the one that almost felt like he was really dilapidated near the end of his career, he was a much better worker, and just things he could do with his body was pretty amazing. So
yeah, I agree.
Controversial, maybe.
That's I think it's controversial if you just look at it as most people would on the mainstream American scene that you saw him in, that we grew up in. But when you paint the whole picture, it's really hard to argue that. And I bet like a lot of these people, I bet Ric Flair would agree with that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what'd you think? This was kind of fun.
That's pretty great. And I think kudos to you, because it wasn't like a tournament. It wasn't like the NCAA where you got the bunnies. It's like you got like the
some layup
shitty teams. Yeah, no, it wasn't like Mojo Rawley versus Ric Flair to start things off.
Yeah,
I mean, when you're making decisions between guys like Harley Race and Bruno Sammartino, there, like I said, some of those, like that one, there's no wrong answer to that question.
No,
it's just all perspective, and that's cool. That's the testament to wrestling and what's so great about it.
Well, this was a lot of fun, my friend, and I hope that those that are listening appreciated the throwback to old school, and go back in Peacock and YouTube and watch some of these guys in the pre. I would say but what was WrestleMania 3, 1980
or something like that, maybe
85. Watching some of these things from the early 80s, I think you would be really fascinated with just the character and the wrestlers that they were, and there were a lot of guys and women that we did not cover tonight, but maybe we'll do that on another episode.
I think, this is a format that's definitely repeatable in different eras and different. Yep. I mean, that's fun. I like it.
Cool.
Good job, my friend.
You too, my friend. Have a great rest of your night. Thanks, everybody.
Woo.
Oh, wait.
Isn't
there? Wait. Did we forget about a wrestler?
Well, it's funny you should bring that up, because
and we can't say goodbye yet. We must have missed somebody.
Well, it's a little bit of a challenge, because you did limit the era, and that kind of makes it a little bit harder for this to happen. But I do think that there is a wrestler that goes by some simple initials that would definitely be hard to miss on this one. And
it was a miscarriage of justice, wasn't it? That we didn't include.
But however, I was, I'm glad you brought this up, because I think we have to transcend the eras, because to be on the list like this, there's certain criteria you have to meet, regardless of the era.
Regardless of the era.
Three things. And it's 1, you got to stay humble.
Yeah.
2, you have to stay hungry. And 3, you have to stay hard.
That's right. Triple H.
And that's where it all ends.
Right there.
Woo!